Welcome to Open Plaza Talks, created by the Hispanic Theological Initiative. Each episode focuses on a topic that matters to you, whether you are in the field, the academy, or the clergy. In this episode, Stephen DiTrolio talks to Nicolás Panotto about decolonizing Latin American theological education. For more information about today's episode, visit htiopenplaza.org.
Welcome to Open Plaza Podcast. My name is Stephen DiTrolio Coakley, here from Princeton, New Jersey. And I have the pleasure of speaking with Nicolás Panotto, who's in Santiago, Chile. He is a theologian. He has his doctorate in social sciences and is the director of the Otros Cruces. Welcome, Nicolás.
Thank you, Stephen. It's a pleasure to be talking with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. One of the things that we've been talking about is you have a book coming out soon. I think you said in the coming months. I have the title in Spanish. What is the title in English?
It's Decolonizing Theological Knowledge in Latin America. That's the title.
I remember seeing it, but I just wanted to make sure. So how did this book project come about? Tell us a little bit about its background. Where do you see it going? Because it's a huge topic, decolonizing theological education in Latin America.
Yeah, it is. Well, it started in my personal journey in an academia in Argentina, specifically with postcolonial studies, decolonial studies, from a anthropological perspective. My background has to be in my academic formation has to be with the study of religion and politics in post-Pentecostal world in Argentina specifically. So I started using some of the tools of postcolonial and decolonial theory, and I started working together with some of the cycles of decolonial thinking in Argentina, but in Latin America as well. And I started to see how religion as a topic was not present, at least with most strongly in the academia in the South Cone, at least in those years. And it was interesting because if we see the history of post-colonial studies, religion was one of the most important topic, at least in subaltern studies, for example, when the subaltern studies and secularism in India and the presence of indigenous groups and decolonial thinking and so on. So I started working, first of all, with religious studies and decolonial theory, and sharing with some of my colleagues in these academic groups in Argentina and in Latin America. And we started to see the importance to think about religion as an important topic within postcolonial and decolonial theory, but also in our moment in Latin America, in our context in Latin America, where religion is a very central key point to think our societies and contexts and so on. So I studied there, but developing the relationship between religious studies and postcolonial theory, I realized that it was a very important topic for the academia of theological studies in Latin America, not just to make a bridge or from post-colonial thinking to theology, if not because post-colonial theory and decolonial theory has a lot to say and to answer to certain topics and problematics and crises that we can see in theological education in Latin America, specifically for our colonial background, the colonial background of theological studies and theological education. So I started working on that, and Latin America, we don't have a lot of studies in decolonial and post-colonial theories from a theological perspective. There are a lot of some translations to Spanish or to Portuguese. In Brazil, there are a lot of studies on post-colonial and decolonial theologies and religious theories. So specifically, I would say this because the post-colonial and decolonial perspective can answer some of the crisis and what I say what I see as a very important points of the crisis of the theological education in our region.
Yeah, it's the decolonial or post-colonial, as you said, is a really powerful tool, specifically in Latin America because of its colonial context. And so, you have conversations in theological places and they say, well, why would we do that? We're not a colonial, you think of the example of Africa or India, that's so recent. So that, for them it's good, but for us, it happened so long ago. But it is incredibly still relevant, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. No, completely. And one of the things that I identify, and I think it is important for the decolonial and post-colonial reading in Latin America, is because of the religious element that has the colonial history of Latin America. Even though it is recognized the relationship between, I don't know, Christianity and colonialism, at the beginning of the colonial enterprise in Latin America, religion has become an element, a secondary element in decolonial and post-colonial thinking in Latin America. And it is interesting to see, and this is one of the things I always emphasize in my dialogue with the more theories in post-colonial, decolonial theory, is that we criticize colonialism in terms of epistemology and academic world in Latin America, but we are using exactly the same perspective on the modern Western secular perspective, thinking about secularism. Or in Latin America, we have this difference between secularism and laicite that actually this year I've been working a lot of that differentiation, because in Europe or United States, you just use secularism in English. But in Latin America, we have this difference between secularism as the way of looking at the religious phenomenon in society, and laicite as the phenomenon of the separation between church and state. But actually this separation, I think, is a problem. It's a colonial heritage that actually offers a lot of problems in the relationship or the way of thinking critically of the relationship of politics and religion in Latin America from history and actually today as well.
Yeah, especially in a context, for example, we're both from Argentina, where Argentina, as far as I know, is still a Catholic country.
It is
correct. Exactly. And so you have an interesting phenomenon where major Protestant groups are considered sects or cults or whatever, but there's, in a given Sunday, there's probably more people in Pentecostal evangelical churches than there are maybe even in Catholic churches. Exactly. So it's even within the realm of confession or faith, there's still these weird boundaries that exist between, what do I do with politics? What is politics? Can I be a Christian Peronista? Can I be a Christian Macrista? Like, what does that look like? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
No, yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And the thing is, for example, this Catholic perspective on it just doesn't affect, if we could say, the way of how we see the religious dynamics, for example, in Argentina, but also Catholicism is part of the culture. It's a symbolic framework that influences in political, in public policies, in the ways of looking at the society in general, and the way of doing politics as well. So that's one of the challenges we have also from decolonial and post-colonial perspective. We cannot just talk about Christianity or even religious just as that phenomenon that we have to describe, and maybe we make some connections with colonialism, far away. There are a lot of links between Catholicism, religious dynamics, and politics in Latin America that we need to deconstruct and decolonize, actually, because this is what I say, being provocative, but with the theories of post-colonial, decolonial turn, and saying, if you do not start thinking on religion and even in theology your decolonial critic perspective will be limited in some of the fields you want to talk about, you know. So we are in the way that we need to increase that dialogue, I think.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is really helpful from your book is you talk about the need for, and this is my own kind of summary in my head, for three things: new infrastructure, a new ecumenical language, or towards more ecumenical conversations, and a new vision of pedagogy. How did you identify those three? Obviously there's more, but if I had to make three central themes, I felt like infrastructure, ecumenical conversation, and pedagogy seemed pretty central to your argument.
Yeah, actually those I would say that are the. So thank you very much for the resume.
I got it.
Like you say, you really, yeah. Actually, those are the three most important fields in the book. So the three elements you mentioned are perfectly, that would be the best summary of the book, of the most important themes or fields I talk in the book. So about the first one, about the structural problem, as you mentioned, we have structural problems in terms of finances, in terms of lack of students, in terms of lack of you know, theological production, and so on. But what I say in the book is that the problem is not, I mean, the structural problem is a symptom of a more fundamental problem. It's the pertinence of theology. So, I mean, why do we do theology? For what do we do theology? What is the importance of doing theology? So, I think in Latin America we need to rethink the place of theology, not just within the church, if not in society. So that's why I always connect, you know, postcolonial and decolonial theology with public theology. There is also another another of my passions as well in terms of theology. So I think that would be one of the most important. It's not just that we need more structure or we need better finances. We need first to find the way of doing theology in terms of what society is demanding, what the church, of course, is demanding. And another thing is how academia, I mean, in terms of universities and research centers in Latin America, could also dialogue with theological institutions. So that would be one thing. About ecumenical, the ecumenical environment, one of my proposals in the book is that most of the ecumenical thinking have been answering to, or has been too attached to the dynamic of what I call, but it's not just what I call, is called for other theologians in Latin America, the institutional ecumenism. You know, so you have ecumenism as a way of doing theology, having relationships between churches and other faith-based organizations and so on. But then we have the institutional ecumenism that you know, are the most important institutions of ecumenism in Latin America, or the most important also narratives on ecumenism. So there is a crisis in the institutional ecumenisms that has tracked the practices of ecumenism in Latin America. So we need, and that's my proposal, an ecumenism from the base communities, you know, from also the
local churches.
Exactly. So that will be another step in resignifying the role of theological and education. And third and last, as the last point you mentioned about pedagogy, that's actually one. Well, first of all, pedagogy is not one of the themes that in theological institutions has been developing as it was needed. So you were a good theologian if you had a PhD in theology and if you knew the content of traditional theology, but you don't need to know how to teach. And it's not just, I mean, I'm not talking about dynamic of how to maintain, entertain your students at the classroom. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about pedagogy. So how we create theology as a common knowledge as from a communitarian perspective, so we need to think more in we could have a very advanced theology, very progressive theology, but we are a lot of steps behind in terms of how we work together in theological institutions in creating collectively the theological knowledge and working in more strategic pedagogical practices. So I think we need to decolonial and postcolonial term has developed that pedagogy is not just a way through, is a way of doing politics, of constructing society and constructing knowledge. So that I think that is something we need to work in theological education in Latin America.
And especially in a region who, I attended Argentine school, I attended Argentine university, and obviously not theological settings, and you could tell, this is still such a, repeat after me, a total forgetting of what it is to learn. It's not just repeating what the professor says. So yeah, totally. I find that pedagogical piece particularly important. Where do you see the future of your work in decolonizing theological education, but where do you see the future in this kind of developing in Latin America? What would that look like?
Well, I have to be honest, and sometimes I'm a little bit pessimistic in some of my readings, but I think we have a future. I mean, we agree with some other theologians here in Latin America in saying that Latin American theological education is in a big crisis in different fields and elements. And the crisis has been on for a while already, and we really need an urgent changes. Not doing those changes are provoking the crisis of different institutions and so on. But I think that we have two big demands from outside, if we could say. First of all, from the churches. Churches are demanding theological education, but in another key. Churches are asking themselves, how can we do to work in society with the current political debates, and how can we have theological tools for that? So it's a demand from the churches, but also there's a big demand from the public sphere. I'm working with civil society organizations, with political groups from Otros Cruces, our organizations, and they are asking, how can we approach strategically the challenges that religious groups are putting into the political debates, and how can we approach the demands of people that are part from our organizations or societies or communities and have a spiritual sensibility, but they don't know how to relate it with their activism or their compromise with human rights and so on, and we can mention a lot of them. So I think the future is going in that direction. It's not just how can we please the church in their own institution, but the society is asking for a renewal, and there are a lot of possibilities. And I think little by little, the theological institutions are looking at that and discerning how to approach that. So I think that we have to go to that direction. But for doing that, we need a lot of changes, not just in terms of structure, if not in very fundamental question in how do we do theology, and from where, and which are the most important element or narratives to work on, and so on. No?
No, I think it's a bright future, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
If people want to learn more about the work that Otros Cruces does, where could they go?
They can go in our website, www.otroscruces.org, and you can find us in the social media, in Twitter, in Instagram, in Facebook. You can find us there. And on our website, we have We don't have so many things in English. We have some materials in English, our presentation, of course, in English. We have a lot of free materials to download in the part of publications. So you are all invited.
Wonderful. And if we want to, I know there's an English version of your book coming out soon.
Exactly.
And where could they go for that? I think you said.
Well, yeah, the book is hopefully coming out at the end of the month. And there will be in all the most known platform like Amazon, like ABB Books, like
Sure.
and also in Latin America. But it's JuanUno1. JuanUno1 is the editorial house, and they have also a website in English because there are some other books in English coming out from the publishing house. So it will be available to the general public. It won't be so difficult to get it.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicolás, for this time. A lot to think on.
Exactly. Thank you very much for the invitation, Stephen. It was
Wonderful.
a pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.
This has been an HTI production. For more information, visit us at htiopenplaza.org. The Hispanic Theological Initiative provides Open Plaza as a public service. The views expressed by the guests are their own. Their appearance on this program or any reference to a specific product or entity they represent does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by HTI.